Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your natal Venus in conjunction with Mars. And it's really interesting because I think I've done a number of personal readings where clients have had this conjunction, and what I've typically said is, you have to watch out for the tendency to be confused about lust versus love, because when you combine Venus, which is all about love, with Mars, which can be about the sex drive and also about that drive in general, the push to do something and the immediacy of things, you get somebody who might uh, enter prematurely into a physical relationship. And if it's amazing, they might think that they're madly in love and not realize that it's just really sex. So, anyway, I realize there's much more to it. So I want to go into that. And first of all, what we're talking about here are feminine and masculine planets. So you remember that book, Women Are from Venus and Men Are from Mars. So, what this does is when you have a conjunction, you will typically have it in the same sign. Not 100% of the time, because it's really about the distance in degrees. But we're just going to assume, for the sake of argument, because I think in most cases it's going to be in the same sign. And when you look at these planets separately in the chart and you're talking about them being in the same sign, you can interpret things in a way that will not be completely accurate, because you're not acknowledging that they're coming together in a conjunction. So, for instance, if we look at Venus and Mars in Aries, taken separately, Venus in Aries is very spirited in love, treating love like a game, a chase. And this will still be the case because it is forming that conjunction with Mars. But Mars will be softened, even though it's in the sign that it rules, which really adds fuel to the fire. Because if we look at Mars separately, in the sign of Aries, it is super duper aggressive. But that contact with Venus makes it less so. It softens it. And, you have to have a certain degree span between two planets for them to be an official conjunction. And from what I understand, I think 6 degrees between these inner planets is a good, orb to work with. The closer they are, the more intense and exact it will be. I just want to give a shout out to this website called teaandrosemary.com, which is actually, I guess, it has astrology on it, which is kind of a funny name for the that type of subject matters. That that URL is kind of interesting. But anyway, this is supposed to give a person a lot of desire to be in a relationship. And we can also look at Mars's desire. So, and just to let you know, the reason I mentioned that website is that that's where I am deriving some really great insights about this conjunction. So, what I would say about this is that if you look at the two signs involved, you will see if this is true or if the Mars part of it is more going to be accurate. In other words, I think that there are some conjunctions where it might not be as much about the relationship. It might be more about the sexual desire. Like, for instance, I could see a sign like Even a sign like Taurus, it's ruled by Venus, but it's very sensual. So that might be one of those things where there might be confusion. Definitely the water signs, because they tend to romanticize things, get emotional, but then you have this Mars physical desire to contend with. Um, and I think that this is considered a flirty combination. So even if the person's in a committed relationship, and I would assume even if they are in love with that other person, they still may want to appeal to others. So if you have Venus and Mars and Libra, because I think they mentioned even like being physically appealing to other people. Let's see. Yeah, remain desirable to the opposite sex. So I can see like somebody with Venus and Mars and Libra being like that, because they just have that need. And, usually I would associate that with women, but there are men who can be flirtatious, but who knows, maybe the men would actually take it to the next level and have these conquests, if these men who are very, and maybe if that's Mars and Venus and Mars and Leo, I don't know if that would be the one to try to prove that they still got it. It's kind of an ego thing. I don't know. I'm just like thinking out loud. So this is supposed to be a charismatic combination. And they mentioned sex appeal and magnetism. They said their exact phrase is magnetically attractive. But I would say, well, maybe when they were saying attractive, they were just talking about something beyond the physical, because I think that sometimes people, if you've ever known anyone who isn't necessarily the most gorgeous or handsome individual, and yet they seem to attract people to them, that's kind of what I get from this, of that type of situation. And another thing about this is that the person can be very appreciative of art and beauty, and at the same time have that sense of the more, they use the word carnal, and I can't think of a better word to use than that. So the aesthetics, it's interesting because the two signs that are ruled by Venus are Taurus and Libra, and Taurus to me is the more carnal version, even though they're both ruled by Venus. But the carnal is obviously the Mars influence. Now, women oftentimes are vulnerable or prone to having this issue confusing sex and love, but men can do the same, for sure. And with men, there's also that additional side of it concerning being attracted to somebody's physical appearance, and just thinking that they're in love at first sight, and then really it's something more on the physical level. But there was another thing that I found really interesting that they mentioned on this site, and they were talking about the relationship that you have with your opposite sex parent. This conjunction can influence your attitude towards love relationships. And they said that it doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. And it's funny because when I have done some of these types of videos, I've said, well, this might be true for a heterosexual relationship, but maybe all of these things that I'm talking about really have nothing to do with that particularly, but still your opposite sex parent. And that's because these represent the male and female dynamic, Venus and Mars. So that is the template. That is the thing that the model for our relationships is that male female situation that we see. One thing they mentioned that I find interesting is that when a person who has this combination asserts themselves, it comes off in a good way, because you know how sometimes, for instance, with I mentioned if somebody has Venus and Mars in Aries, well, somebody with Mars in Aries might come across as pushy, and people who come across as aggressive tend to get pushback from other people who kind of don't like to feel like they're being dominated. Even if the person isn't really trying to, they just may come across that way. And this softens it, obviously, and makes it more pleasant, easy to accept in terms of asserting oneself. I don't know if I said this at the beginning, but this is this conjunction can indicate that you really want and desire, you desire relationship. And this is because Mars represents that, and Venus is merging with that. Now, Venus wants relationship, and that's why Venus is bringing that to Mars. But that sense of urgency, I guess you would call it, is merging with relationships. And yet, I would say that if this conjunction is in Gemini or Aries, there may be more kind of, I wouldn't necessarily call it game playing, but this desire to play around with relationships and see them as and especially Aries, I think the thrill of the hunt, the thrill of trying to get someone, conquest. With Gemini, it can be just this flirtatious type of thing that may lead to something greater. But I could very definitely see this conjunction in Gemini producing one relationship after the other, if the person doesn't feel the sense that they have truly found the right person. Because Gemini has a real need for novelty, variety. And so I could see that flirtatiousness might kind of win out in that particular conjunction. With a conjunction in Cancer, for instance, it might be much more intense, if you will, that the person is really wanting, desiring love in a relationship, and the sexual part of it might even get drowned out a little bit with the desire for love. But anyway, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated with you. And if you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.